Next, Mom will be killed. Help.
Late at night in the pouring rain, my 10-year-old grandson came running into our house, his body covered in scratches. I tried to ask him what had happened, but he seemed distraught and had no idea what was going on. He just shouted,
Stop, Dad. Save Mom.
I knew that something terrible must have happened, but I didn't know what to do, and I was at a loss. That's when it happened.
Absolutely a no.
My husband interrupted my grandson's words, who was trying his best to appeal to us, and yelled at him. Hearing his cold words, my grandson suddenly started laughing out loud the next moment. My husband Harrison and I are a retired couple who have taken a break from work and childrearing to relax in our retirement years. Our daughter has married far away and our son has started his own family near my house. My son Jackson is an employee of a prestigious trading company, and my daughter-in-law Nancy is a housewife. My grandson Kenny is 10 years old, a little frail but studious and intelligent. Both our son and his wife and our daughter and her husband have no relational problems, and I spend my days with my quiet husband, taking occasional trips and taking care of our grandson, which is the ideal retirement for me. So I have nothing to complain about such a life. That's what I thought.
Oh, Kenny, how did you get that bruise?
Well, I fell down.
One day when Jackson and his wife came to visit us as usual, I noticed a large bruise on my grandson's arm.
Where did you say you fell?
I forgot.
When Kenny answered bluntly, he turned away from me and began to concentrate on his reading. I wondered if he had fallen down while playing, and I suddenly wondered. Come to think of it, when was the last time I played outside with him? My grandson, who was an indoor person by nature, spent his time reading books and solving problem books when he came to our house. That in itself was not a problem, but it seemed to me that his enthusiasm for studying was a little too strong. From this time on, the bruises on his body increased every time I saw him. I became concerned and asked Kenny many times, but the answer was always the same: he fell, bumped it, or forgot it, and usually one of those answers would come back. I wondered if my grandson, who rarely plays outside, could have such frequent physical injuries. But after a few repetitions, I found out something. Whenever I asked him about his injuries, he would always ask how Nancy was doing at his side. I didn't notice it at first because it was really only for a moment, but sure enough, my grandson was making some kind of eye contact with my daughter-in-law. Could he really be hiding something from me? I decided to ask Nancy to go out and talk with him alone. Nancy, I have a favor to ask you. I want to give Kenny something as a reward for studying hard, but I don't know what kind of things he likes. Can you buy him something with this? Saying this, I gave her 2 $100 bills.
Oh, but is it okay? Such a large amount?
That's okay. Keep the change. It's for letting me see my grandson all the time. Keep it. But don't tell my son.
Thank you very much. I'm off then.
I checked on Nancy, who smiled demurely and went off to do some shopping, and I walked up to my grandson. Kenny, why do you study so much?
Because I want to get 100 points.
I asked him as soon as I was alone with Kenny, and he answered without taking his eyes off the book. If you get a perfect score, what will happen to you?
If I do that, I'll be fine.
Here I felt a little uncomfortable. He was blunt, but he was able to give an accurate response to what he was asked. However, I felt that this was not an answer to my question. What do you mean by you'll be fine?
That's what Mom said. She said I'm no good for anything but 100 points. Is that enough? I need to concentrate.
I guess he was getting tired of being asked so many times, because he looked at me with a grumpy look in his eyes. I thought he would not answer my question any further, so I quietly left the room. Hey Jackson, about Kenny, has he ever been like that before?
What do you mean?
I asked my son, who was relaxing in his room playing a game, about my grandson. Jackson often comes to our house with his wife and Kenny, but he usually stays in what used to be his room. Perhaps he wanted to temporarily abandon his role as Nancy's husband and father of his son and return to being a child. The reason he went out of his way to bring his family along may have been to show Kenny's face and show some filial piety. I thought he was a quiet boy to begin with, but isn't he a little too absorbed in his studies? Besides, he doesn't seem to be smiling much these days.
Is that so? I don't think so.
My son responded appropriately without stopping to play the game.
You know what? Besides, isn't Kenny's body injured a lot these days?
Really? I've been so busy with work that I haven't been paying attention to that kind of thing. I think Nancy knows better.
I was so annoyed by his attitude as if it was someone else's problem, even though it was my own child, that I pulled the TV power cord out of the outlet.
Ugh! What are you doing? I was just winning.
We're having a serious discussion about Kenny's unnatural bruises, and you're more concerned about the game? How dare you, a father, shamelessly tell me that you don't know what's going on with your child and that I should ask your wife? Raising a child is not only a mother's job. Do you even realize that you have become a parent?
I felt ashamed of him, even though he was my own son, and scolded him seriously.
I'm a father. I work late every day to support my family, don't I? Nancy is a mother and a housewife, so it's natural for her to do everything for Kenny. It's a division of labor.
I guess that's one way of putting it. I was a stay-at-home mom too, but your father cared about you and your sister. Don't you care about your own children?
Wow, there it is. There are parents who push their own way of doing things. We're doing fine the way we're doing it. Don't tell me what to do.
My son, who seemed to be very angry that I had lectured him, left the house quickly, leaving my grandson and his wife behind, saying only that he was going home.
What was that? That's impossible.
As I stood there stunned, the front door opened and Nancy returned with a box of donuts.
Oh, Mom, what happened to Jackson? He drove off in the car. He looked kind of angry.
Oh no, he drove off. What about the two of you? I'm sorry. It's because I had a fight with him.
As Nancy helped me prepare donuts and drinks, I told her about my earlier conversation with my son and grandson. Then she looked depressed for some reason and apologized.
It's my fault. I'm a mother and I didn't look after Kenny properly. Oh no. I'm not blaming you. Children can get hurt when they don't know they're being hurt.
I didn't expect her to look at me so sadly, so I tried to calm her down, but Nancy's expression didn't change. Besides, why should a mother be the only one who has to know everything about her child nowadays? He doesn't care about Kenny at all. I really can't help it, oh. Suddenly, her wrist caught my eye, and my eyes were glued to it. It was summer and Nancy was wearing a long-sleeved cardigan, and she had a bruise on her arm just like my grandson. Perhaps noticing my gaze, she hurriedly withdrew her hand.
I'll take this with me.
There was something unnatural about Nancy as she gingerly walked out of the kitchen with the donuts and drinks, the unnatural scars on both of their bodies. And when I saw my grandson seeming overly concerned about his grades and my daughter-in-law panicking, I knew there was definitely something wrong. After that day, I began to actively visit my son and his wife at their home. Because of Jackson's bad mood, I decided that my visits would basically be during the weekdays when he was not around.
Oh, Mom. Welcome.
Hi Nancy, I'm back from shopping. I got some ice cream. Is Kenny home yet? Yes, but he is studying right now. He has an achievement test coming up. Most of the time, it was only my daughter-in-law who greeted me, and my grandson stayed in his room for a long time. He said he was going to take an entrance exam for a private junior high school, and he is working hard for it now. Even after that, I could not see Kenny because the timing was not right for some reason, even though I visited him many times. Nancy also responds to me in a manner of speaking, but she always seems to be fidgety and restless. Maybe I was overthinking it, but I feel like I get the vibe that she wanted me to leave as soon as possible. I can't see my grandson's face, and my daughter-in-law doesn't really welcome me. However, I couldn't think of any concrete way to resolve this blur except to visit them frequently. Harrison, could you say something to Jackson for me? Nancy and Kenny seem to be in a lot of pain, and I have a feeling that it's Jackson's fault. I tried to talk to my husband about it, but he didn't seem to want to talk about it, and would either let the subject drop or leave the room without saying a word. It is like talking to a wall. So I stopped coming by their house as much. Finally, we stopped communicating with each other for about a week. My son never called me back, and I wondered if I had gone too far. But I'm still worried about leaving them alone. If my daughter-in-law and my grandson were having second thoughts about my son, I wanted to do something about it. But I didn't realize at the time that the situation was far more serious than I had thought and had reached a point where I could no longer handle it on my own. Around midnight of the day, I fell asleep, thinking that I would go back to see Kenny and his family tomorrow with a souvenir. Suddenly, the doorbell rang repeatedly, startling me awake. I rushed to answer the door to see what was going on, but it was my grandson who was there.
What is it? What's wrong with you? What's this terrible wound?
To my surprise, my grandson was standing there shivering, bleeding from all over his body.
Grandma, please. Help me.
As soon as he saw my face, he looked distraught and hung on.
Next, Mom will be killed. You have to stop Dad.
Kenny was in a complete panic, and when I tried to ask him what was going on, he just wouldn't get the point.
Wait! I need to do something about your wound.
Dad got out of control and Mom tried to get me out, and she dropped me from the 3rd floor. But I'm okay. I fell, but the railing caught me. But Mom.
After that, my grandson only asked me to stop Jackson and help Nancy. I had to patch him up. But I was also concerned about what Kenny said. I didn't know where to start, so I just stood there holding my grandson's shoulder.
Hey, shut up. You know what time it is.
Suddenly, my husband's voice rang out from behind me, and I came to my senses.
Stop, Dad? Help, Mom? What are you talking about? Absolutely not.
He said these unexpected words to a sobbing Kenny. I was so surprised that I froze with my eyes wide open, and my grandson stopped crying instantly. The next moment, however, Kenny suddenly started laughing aloud.
I knew it. Grandpa was the same with Dad.
As soon as he said that, he began to blurt out another large tear.
Grandpa is my dad's dad, so you don't care about me. You only need a good boy.
Seeing my grandson holding his head and stomping his feet on the ground, I was so mortified that I glared at my husband and was about to open my mouth when he continued.
Yes, that's right. I hate fools.
He spat out quietly, And then, as if out of the blue, he picked up Kenny and carried him off.
So you are the only one I will help.
I then did as Harrison asked and prepared the tools to patch up my grandson. In fact, my husband's last job was as a surgeon, and he was the chief of surgery at a general hospital not far from here. Couldn't you have used a few more gentle words to calm him down? Whether he heard my words or not, he silently continued to administer first aid to Kenny. My husband is a man of few words, so I guess he thought it would be quicker to blackmail my grandson into quieting down first, rather than trying to convince him with a lot of words. Kenny seemed a little confused, but Harrison's momentum pushed him to accept the treatment. But he still mumbled,
Mom.
And was worried about Nancy, whom he had left at home.
I will protect you. Don't worry. Your grandma and I are the only ones here. So it's okay to tell the truth.
After the appropriate treatment seemed to relieve his pain, my grandson began to talk in whispers. It was during this conversation that I learned the terrible truth. When he had finished telling us everything, he began to doze off, as if he had been so tense until then, and then he fell asleep.
Let's call the police. I won't let them get away with it.
Of course. But I'll give them one last chance.
We had no hesitation. I moved in with my husband to bring them to justice for what they had done to my grandson. 2 days later, my daughter-in-law came to our house with a lot of injuries.
Mom, please help me. Kenny is gone. Jackson did this to me. I had to save Kenny. I had to save him.
Calm down. I understand.
I pushed Kenny down from the 3rd floor. But I didn't do it on purpose. I don't know what to do. If he finds me, he will hurt me even worse.
Nancy was talking with tears in her eyes and a croaky voice. The scars on her face and body and her torn clothes looked really painful, but I was not distraught to see her like that. Jackson has been in my house since yesterday, but who did that to you? As soon as I said that, Harrison appeared on our doorstep holding my son by the scruff of his neck. In fact, Jackson had been caught by my husband since last night, brought to our house, and was being watched until morning. My daughter-in-law looked at us in turn and expressed her surprise.
That wound looks as if it was made just a few minutes ago. I'll take care of it. Of course, you'll have to give me a full explanation.
The son and daughter-in-law, pushed by the husband's spirit, quietly entered the living room and began to discuss the matter after finishing treating her first.
First of all, you say your child has disappeared, but isn't it too late for you to come? What have you both been doing for 2 days?
My daughter-in-law turned her head down and didn't answer any of my questions. She had told a blatant lie that it was Jackson's fault, who was not supposed to be home, so naturally that would be her response.
I'm, on a business trip.
What?
My husband glared at him as he also told a lie, which was also easily caught.
Can't you tell me yourself? Then I'll tell you.
With that, Harrison dumped the photographic evidence of what they had been doing on the table. There, Jackson was on the scene dating a woman we didn't know. And there was a clear picture of Nancy frequenting a nightclub.
The one who told me about you guys was a patient I was working on right before I retired, and he's a friend of yours.
My husband was asked by that patient, "Did your son leave his wife?" He began to distrust his son and his wife when he was told the story. This led him to realize that Jackson was having an affair, and he asked a friend to look further into the matter and discovered that his daughter-in-law was also into one of the dancers.
You! What do you mean? You're a mother, and you're such a lousy one for paying off a man at a place like that.
Hey, Why am I the only one who's a bad person? Who is this woman to you? I only paid for the drinks. This is not cheating.
They started arguing, and Harrison yelled at them.
Shut up!
She covered her face with her hands and started to cry.
You never come home at all. You say you're at work, but you're so bossy and bad at parenting, and I've been putting up with it for a long time, but I'm really sick of it, so I wanted to release the stress.
To vent your anger, you made up a bunch of lies to your kid to get him on your side, and even lied about your own injuries?
When I said this with a cold look in my eyes, Nancy stopped crying instantly.
Kenny was scared that Mom was going to get beat up by Dad because he wasn't getting good grades.
Nah. I didn't do that.
My son was telling the truth, and as proof, my grandson told me that he had never actually seen Jackson harm her. So who was telling him that? When I asked him, he said his mom told him so.
First of all, Kenny said he was worried about his parents, but now his dad is having an affair. His mom is playing with a guy, and I feel sorry for him.
But Kenny is actually injured.
About that, this is your account, right? I showed my daughter-in-law a certain social networking account. It's interesting. It's very popular among my friends. It's a good way to pass the time in my old age. I had no idea that my pastime would be useful in such a way. A wife who fights her husband's unreasonableness, a mother who defends her children by enduring her husband's cruel treatment. How admirable.
What's that all about? What does that have to do with me?
I was really stunned by Nancy's bad attitude. She wouldn't make eye contact with me and kept her mouth shut. His face is hidden, but that's Kenny, isn't it? The towel you see here is a custom-made towel, printed with a picture he drew. It was a gift from my husband and I. The photo submitting app had also posted photos of Kenny with bruises and other scars. In addition to words of encouragement from those who sympathized with her, it was also apparent that she had received some support money. The social networking sites are amazing. It's great that people can easily give and receive money to those they want to support with the touch of a button. No wonder so many young people are trying to do this. Sadly, it seems that there is no end to the number of people who post extreme content in an attempt to get attention, as long as they can make a story out of it. I never imagined that it would happen to my own people. You updated just a few minutes ago. Your clothes and hairstyle are the same as yours now. My husband beat me up again today. Jackson was so far away from home. I wonder if Jackson can hit someone from afar. I looked at my daughter-in-law, who looked down and gritted her teeth, and I was convinced that I had hit the nail on the head. Didn't you really know that my son was having an affair?
Ah, I've been found out.
Nancy suddenly burst out laughing so loudly that everyone present was startled. Her usual quiet self was gone, and it was as if she had changed.
It's all your fault for the way you brought him up.
She seemed to be getting desperate and began to blurt out a confession. She told the whole story, that my son had been cheating on her for a year, that she was fed up with his constant nagging about discipline and academic achievement even before her child started school, and that she had thoroughly played the role of a lovable mother who endured her husband's unreasonableness in front of her child. Daughter-in-law said,
Kenny, as long as you study hard, you'll be fine. I don't care how much it hurts as long as it's for you. Nah, you know what? Jackson, thanks to me, Kenny has become a good, studious boy, just the way you like him.
My son was shaking when Nancy spoke to him. She had injured her son to gain more supporters, and even disguised her own physical injuries as if they had been inflicted by her husband.
I'm not going to do it just to end up getting beat up. I was going to use whatever I could get my hands on and play around with you and then leave you. Oh, what a shame.
My daughter-in-law, with a mean smile on her face, turned away and said so.
Wait a minute. Did you just say something usable? Don't tell me you're talking about Kenny. Are you saying that you used him as a tool to draw sympathy from others?
So what? He's my child, so it's okay.
Are you serious? Don't you know how much Kenny has been hurt by your selfishness?
I tried my best to suppress my anger and slap them, but nothing seemed to be getting through. Jackson just shrugged and looked like he was about to cry.
I'm sorry I can't sue him for injury, but your son is completely at fault for the affair. I'll ask him to pay alimony and divorce him.
Nancy said with a sly smile on her face. My daughter-in-law said,
I'm going to take Kenny with me. I gave birth to him, I raised him, and he is completely on my side. That's how I educated him.
She seemed to think we were completely stupid.
Then I wonder if Kenny will believe you when he hears this.
When I pulled out a voice recorder from my pocket, which was in the process of recording, her face went from pale to white.
You old hag. You're so sneaky.
Her face immediately turned devilish and she jumped at me, but my husband restrained her with one hand.
Next time you try to touch my wife, I'll break your arm.
Nancy seemed to be terrified as he yelled at her while grabbing her hand, and she obeyed Harrison's order to sit down. We are responsible for raising Jackson, who was indifferent to raising children and became unfaithful to his wife. But my daughter-in-law's behavior was also not proper.
As grandparents, I can't trust you with our grandson.
I looked at them both nodding and said clearly,
Did you push Kenny off the 3rd floor just to make a splash? It was your fault too, Jackson, because you neglected your family to begin with.
My husband later told me that my face at that time was just like a demon.
What else do you have to say?
Here Harrison gave them one last chance. But such mercy was futile, and neither of them said a word of apology to Kenny.
Your kid is gone, and you don't ask anything?
The son and his wife finally looked up when the sighing husband said this to them.
The wound was bad, but I only had to stop the bleeding and get a few stitches. There was nothing wrong with the bone.
After we took our grandson to the hospital, we asked our daughter and her husband, who lived far away, to take care of him. He was not there, but neither Jackson nor Nancy had ever asked where their child was. It was obvious at that point that they only cared about themselves.
I let you know about this, anyway. You were Kenny's parents. Well, maybe it doesn't matter to you.
I'll make sure my son pays for the affair. But I'm going to submit this recording to the proper authorities as evidence. I'll fight for custody, too.
Wait a minute. If you do that, I won't be able to see Kenny anymore. No way.
What kind of mindset does she have to be grieving over the fact that she won't be able to see her child?
Is it public opinion you're worried about? Or is it that you're so worried about not having anything to post on social networking sites?
Harrison told her so, and she stared at us in frustration.
Oh, you know what? I'm the victim, right? She was the one who hurt Kenny.
My son, who had been silent the whole time, muttered something in a voice like a mosquito, but what was it with him and his wife?
Of course you're just as guilty as her. Why don't you go and see your lover? Don't get involved with us anymore.
I called the police. You two, you're going together.
Jackson and Nancy. After we had said our last words to each of them, we had no choice but to kick them out of the house. A police car was already parked at our front door, ready to go at any moment.
No, 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 it's not right. I'm your son, not this guy. If the neighbors find out that I got into trouble with the police.
Yes, that's right. It would ruin your reputation to have a criminal in your family.
I don't care what you say. I don't want you here for 1 second. Besides, we're not your parents anymore.
My son and his wife were ranting and raving, and I, in turn, was yelling back at them. I was not the least bit bothered by the stares of the neighbors who came out of their houses when they heard the commotion, nor by my husband's voice when he noticed and stopped me. In the end, the son and his wife were taken away with a disappointed look on their faces. My son was sentenced to pay his wife $45,000 in alimony, and Nancy was found guilty of injuring her son and sentenced to 1 year in prison. The audio evidence left on the voice recorder and a detailed examination of Kenny's physical injuries were the deciding factors. Although she fought with us for custody of our grandson until the very end, the court officially ruled that she was not qualified to be his mother. Why did she think she could win when she had been going to nightclubs right up to the trial and had used all the alimony she had received from our son to pay for it? They both wanted to meet Kenny, but of course we refused and we moved to another place with our grandson. Harrison and I discussed this and decided not to tell Kenny the truth about his parents, only that they would always think of him even though they were apart. 2 years later, he passed the municipal secondary school entrance exam in his new place. Through lots of involvement with my husband, he has begun to develop an interest in a career in medicine. I will continue to do my best to support such a dream of my grandson. What did you think of this story? Please subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.